If you observe how capable professionals operate today, you see a strange contradiction. They spent their entire day context switching, rushing from emails to meetings to message threads. They feel incredibly busy, yet by the end of the day, they finished almost nothing that requires actual depth. Most people assume this is a discipline problem, but it is actually a structural misunderstanding of the brain. Highly capable people look at their own intelligence and conclude that because they can comprehend complex ideas, they should be able to advance several of them at the exact same time. In most corporate environments, operating with a dozen browser tabs and 3 ongoing projects is rarely seen as a liability. It is worn as a badge of competence. It becomes a core part of their professional identity. I am the person who can manage the chaos. Here's what's interesting about that. The identity of I can handle complexity directly collides with the biological limits of how human attention actually functions. The brain does not scale with your ambition. You can certainly manage multiple priorities over the course of a quarter, but the moment you conflate managing priorities with executing them simultaneously, you build a system designed to collapse your deep work throughput. The alternative approach is simple in its execution. Choose the single highest leverage task in front of you and actively abandon all other options for a specific window of time. For a high performer used to juggling constant demands, this often feels uncomfortable. It feels narrow-minded or even irresponsible to temporarily ignore the influx of incoming requests. Now, it is true that the evidence on specific productivity interventions is sometimes mixed. Certain organizational systems work well for some people and fail for others. But the physical limits of cognitive load are universally restrictive. In a working environment defined by infinite options, intentionally selecting a single foreground task is the highest form of strategic clarity. To understand why parallel processing fails, we have to look at the mechanics of deep work. Solving any hard problem requires sustained engagement. If we look at this model mapping working memory, it acts as a central resource hub. No effort can expand its fixed capacity. When you pause your primary task for a minor interruption, your brain physically redirects its processing lines to that new data. When switching back to the original project, you don't pick up seamlessly where you left off. The brain has to spend actual energy reloading the previous context, retrieving the variables, and orienting itself back to the problem. Because every switch forces this biological reorientation, a fragmented schedule structurally prevents you from achieving depth. The real cost happens after the switch. Returning to your main task is rarely a clean break from the interruption. Looking back at our model, we see a mechanism known as hanging threads. When you leave an interaction unfinished, the brain automatically keeps a background process running to track it, leaving an open line that continuously siphons a fraction of your energy. A 5-second glance at your inbox introduces unresolved loops into working memory. As you attempt more parallel tasks, these background threads multiply, generating massive amounts of invisible cognitive contention. Just checking email is never a neurologically neutral action. Parallel processing multiplies this silent overhead until your entire system gridlocks. When ambitious professionals refuse to drop the habit of parallel processing, they typically try to force their way through the bottleneck using sheer willpower. The first common compensation is extending the workday. They put in longer hours at night or on weekends to compensate for their daily schedule being too fragmented to complete deep work. But extending the timeline of a compromised system doesn't remove the contention. It just burns your internal state without increasing your completion rate on difficult problems. The second compensation is building elaborate task management systems. The assumption is that if you can perfectly organize your many simultaneous priorities, you can handle them all at once. These frameworks might make you feel more in control, but they do not increase your throughput. They merely organize the chaos with greater precision. Using raw effort to overpower structural fragmentation is a strategy that works against your own biology. It results only in exhaustion. The only effective solution is to eliminate the structural causes of cognitive contention. In this cleared workspace model, you select the highest leverage task for your deep work block, making it your sole focus. The critical second half is handling the residue. Capture everything else, incoming demands, random ideas, on a trusted list labeled after this block. By writing these distractions down, you provide the mechanism your brain needs to accept the deferral. This allows it to shut down those hanging threads. Externalizing uncompleted tasks onto a trusted list is the only reliable way to free your working memory, allowing you to fully allocate your attention to a single foreground variable. To maintain that contention-free state, you must protect it with aggressively boring boundaries. This means closing every browser tab except the one you need. It means putting your phone in another room and operating inside a single full-screen window. The most practical starting point requires nothing more than a piece of paper. Before your next deep work session, sit down and complete this exact sentence. The goal here isn't to pretend your other work doesn't exist. It's to establish an ironclad rule for your attention. If you take one thing from this, before your next block, write the one task that would still matter if nothing else got done until lunch. Protect that block like a contract. Everything else can wait on the list.